Welcome to the first episode of Insider Investing. Sahil and have been friends, colleagues, drinking buddies for over 15 years now. And fortunately or unfortunately, we're also co-founders and co-podcasters now for the very first time in our lives. So super excited to be here. A lot of our journey as wealth managers has been about learning from the smartest and wealthiest individuals in India about their investing journeys. We thought, why not bring that story out to all of you? And that is the effort behind insider investing. Hello and welcome, everyone. Sahil.
So let me introduce you to a friend and someone I've known for the last decade or more, whom I've worked very closely with. I have tremendous respect for this gentleman, and he's taught me a lot in life over the last couple of years. Mr. Amit Jatia needs no introduction, but I'd love to say a couple of lines about him. Um Possibly at the age of 14, he tried a milkshake in Japan, and he probably said, I'm just loving it. He didn't leave any stone unturned, came back and jumped right into starting McDonald's in India. Something which is interesting is he also completed his degree in hamburgerology from the Hamburger Institute in the US, which is super, super interesting. We'd love to know more. Restaurants in India has a turnover of over 1,100 crores. And I think Amit is committed a lot to growing the business over the next 5 years and increasing the number of restaurants in India as well. Amit started right at the beginning, even while in university, he went through all the rigmarole of understanding the business, getting his hands dirty, and came back to India and Indianized the entire menu for India. So you got the best of both worlds in terms of the global menu and the Indian menu, which today has been a big success story for Amit. And his new venture, which is the McCafe, has actually sold more than 10 million cups so far in India. So, welcome, Amit. It's a pleasure hosting you here, and we'd love to know more about your journey.
Oh, thank you so much, Sandeep and Sahil. Really appreciate it, and yeah, happy to be here. Yeah, it's been quite a fun journey, I must say. Very challenging, but good fun. So I'm more than happy today to share sort of my learnings, my experiences with everybody. Really happy to be here today.
So, Amit, thanks for taking time for doing this for us. One of so in my previous role, I used to travel quite a bit, and one of the high points of that travel, especially going to Pune, used to be
Hmm.
stopping over at the McDonald's on the way and grabbing that cup of coffee from McCafe. It's been right through the pandemic, I've missed that caffeine shot. How has the last couple of years been for you guys? Because you're in the services business, you're out there meeting your customers, etc. How has the pandemic treated you?
Um, See, my philosophy has been that all times are good times for business. I'm not saying that the pandemic was a good thing for anybody for that matter. It was completely unprecedented and a challenge that I don't think any business has ever seen.
Hmm.
But my philosophy is always to sort of find the positivity in every difficult situation. And I told my team right from day one that as we enter this pandemic, and when we come out of the pandemic, if the business is foundationally stronger, then we have not wasted this opportunity.
Mm.
So I would say that it's been very challenging. In the beginning, we were grappling with a lot of things. But I think the leadership team, and I want to credit them with this thinking, where they came up with sort of a three mantra plan. The first was basically survival. Okay. The second was revival and then growth. So we said that in the very early days, as long as we survive as a business, it's all about cash flow management and the safety of our employees. And as the pandemic starts settling down and the new normal comes into play, the idea was to basically revive the business back. And finally, once the business was revived, the idea was to get back on a growth plan. So I must say that if I look at all of last year, we in the first half we lost a lot of money because we are retail on the ground, 10,000 employees, huge
Absolutely, yeah.
infrastructure, all for growth, right? And when you are sort of getting prepared for growth, you obviously don't sort of staff your organization or have resources only for running a mature business. So we had to deal with all those challenges. But I think in the second half, we made up not only all the losses, but essentially we pared down, we were always zero debt in any case, but we essentially were able to build a small reserve as well. So I think that was a bit of a mantra. I think the pandemic continues, volatility is the new reality, and we continue to sort of deal with that.
And personally, how has it been, Amit? Away from the business, handling it remotely must have been a crazy experience.
See, I mean, I right from day one always believed that it's about the team. And I'm not one of those entrepreneurs that is sort of a control maniac. I'm not saying there are some entrepreneurs like that, there are some otherwise, but I like to give authority and responsibility to people. And therefore, I must say that we as a team came together. They were shoulder to shoulder walking with me. Primarily, the responsibility fell on Smita, who's sort of the managing director and also my wife in that sense. But I'm able to handle stress quite all right. So even through the pandemic, I did not have any sleepless nights. But I'll tell you the reason for that though. And so people would always ask me that, why aren't you all going more aggressive? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And I would always tell people it's about sustainable growth. And to my mind, India is a marathon. India is not a sprint. I can tell you that in any business for that matter. And the depth of the market is sort of very limited, but of course there is opportunity. And to mine that depth, you got to run your business right. So I would always tell people that think of our business as a ship going from one place to the other. And when you are in the middle of the ocean and turbulence comes, we shouldn't be knocked over. And in other words, we call it oxygen canisters. So the good news is that we had a lot of extra oxygen canisters that took us through this journey. And because we entered with it with a decent platform, I was not very, very worried about it. But the important thing was, how do we do this without, people losing their jobs? So I'm quite happy to say that none of people lost their jobs. Of course, every company has vaccinated all their employees. We took that on us, but we did our best to ensure that we are human through this process, and it's not only about money. So I was quite all right, to be honest. I did not have many sleepless nights.
Awesome,
No, I think
awesome.
golden stuff there, Amit, especially the thing that you mentioned about survival, revival, and growth. I feel like for a lot of our entrepreneurs, listeners, I think this is very valuable because every business at some point, sometimes because of external issues or sometimes because of internal problems, goes through challenges. But I just want to dig deeper into the story of building this foundation that you spoke about, right?
Mm.
Um, how did you like envision McDonald's in India to be this behemoth that it has become? What is the foundational stuff that you guys did at the very beginning that enabled you to scale?
Yeah, that's a great question, and to my mind, it was a building block approach. While I knew that it's going to be a challenging journey, I really did not anticipate it to be what, at least in my opinion, an extremely challenging journey. I mean, first and foremost, uh, to settle the brand down in India, with all the other sort of angles involved, globally, McDonald's does sell beef, while in India we were veg, non-veg separated and all of that. It was important to get that communication right from a consumer point of view, from the government point of view, and all of that. So the early days were very challenging. Also, eventually what I learned is that the cost structure of a US business is very different in India. And the dynamics of how the business plays out, both in terms of sales and cost, are again very different. So the answer does not lie in cutting corners and giving the Indian consumer sort of a raw deal. The answer lies in, without losing the brand essence, how do you get the cost structure and make it relevant for India? So, our journey, not that I'm telling you from a hindsight point of view, I didn't know this when I was entering in, but essentially our journey had about sort of three or four components to it. In the early days, it was all about what I call localization. Yeah, so the idea was to take our global strength and localize it. So it was all about supply chain, menu, equipment, hiring local talent, training them, and so on and so forth. From 97 to about 2002, 2003, it is what I call the build phase. Yeah, in the
Mm-hmm.
build phase, unlike other people, and this is where I feel we differentiated ourselves, we took the time to build. Yeah, at the time we were building, we were growing, but we were not crazy about it. So the first thing we did is get the menu right. We started understanding what the consumers think about the brand. So we started making changes to the way the consumers were perceiving the brand. But more importantly, after all of this, we started getting the cost structure right. So we launched what I call Restaurant Operating Platform 1.0, where we essentially asked ourselves the question that what is it that we can do to bring the cost down, right? Where it does not impact food safety and the consumer, right? But all the nice to haves have to go. And with
Mm.
that, we were able to bring the cost structure down by 60, 70% and get the unit economics from a break even point of view right by 2003. So once we got all of that, I call the 2003 to 2012 the sort of grow phase. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that is when we built hundreds and hundreds of restaurants, but all on solid unit economics. And we launched happy price menu. We got affordability right for the consumer. We got brand relevance by launching menu products that were more sensible for the consumer. We launched delivery. We did all of that. In
Mm-hmm.
2012, right, we said now is the time to accelerate, right? So while this is the grow phase, the important thing is how do we now sort of take this business to a whole different platform. And that was when we started opening about 30, 35 restaurants a year. We launched McCafe, we imaged all our restaurants and so on. So these are the three or four phases. But I must tell you, I felt that we were very aggressive. Maybe it did not come out and people thought that it took too much time. But remember, we introduced the concept of eating out and making burgers relevant to the consumer. So this was our journey, and this is how we sort of built it. Along the way, tons of problems, tons of crises that came.
I'm sure. Yeah.
It's all the company is built on that foundation today.
That's lovely, Amit. Amit, I'm going to pull you back to one question,
Sure.
which is on you mentioned the oxygen canister, right? Can you dig a little bit deeper into that? And the second part was on the McCafe journey. How has that been, and penetrating into this segment in India, where a lot of people are tea drinkers versus coffee drinkers? How has that panned out for you?
Sure. So I'll take the oxygen canisters. So the oxygen canister word obviously is not invented by me per se. So I read a lot of sort of books, and this one came from, I think, Good to Great, okay, by Jim Collins. And in the early days when we were really struggling, I would take our management team and leadership team, because how do you keep them entrenched and motivated when they can see the rest of the world moving ahead and we are struggling, building one restaurant at a time and things like that. So one of the things that stayed with me is that, as I mentioned to you earlier, that, or if you look at a car, especially how the Germans build it, the point is you don't build it so tight to capacity that if you put one feather on top and it all collapses. Similarly, in the business, right? I mean, particularly the pandemic is a great example. Basically, if all our oxygen was just enough to keep the business going, when the crisis came and we were running short of oxygen, these extra canisters is what kept us breathing and I could sleep easy. So, really, in other words, it's whatever resource you need. Primarily, it starts with capital, to be honest. In a business, that's the reality of life. And the other most important thing is human capital. Because during crisis, if you don't have the right skills, if you don't have the right sort of people involved, including suppliers and other partners, yeah, the business could collapse. So, I mean, that's really what I meant by oxygen canisters. In this case, we were debt free, we had cash in the bank, our cost of borrowing was very low because we were net cash. So,
Correct.
that's what I meant from a business point of view in terms of oxygen canisters. Coming to McCafe, you see, a business is not about what you see today, right? One of my gurus after Jack Welch was, somebody who I would follow a lot was Steve Jobs. I was absolutely a total fan of Steve Jobs.
Same with us. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, nobody would have told you that consumers need an iPad, Okay. So what I learned is that consumers cannot tell you what they want, but consumers can tell you what they don't have or what they aspire to be. And it is the business's job to figure out, yeah, how to put it together and bring a consumer value proposition. So everything is about the consumer value proposition, right? Now, when we launched McCafe, we felt that India is a young country. The demographics are very much in favor of youth, and basically, we felt that the coffee culture is going to catch up in India more than the tea culture. And tea is drank at home, but really, coffee is a great thing that is drunk outside. And thankfully, in this case, Cafe Coffee Day and some others, even Starbucks had actually started, Costa Coffee had started. So that culture was sort of catching on. In fact, there was a team that did some work on India. It was a global team, and they told us that McCafe is something that India should not do. Right. So that was on top of that. That's what we were hearing. However, my our sense was finally it's the feel.
It's the
Finally, when
field,
you're
right?
out there in the market, right, and you're watching consumers, you're observing their behavior, you're seeing what else is happening. We felt this is the right thing to do. Now, this is the important part. Globally, we implement McCafe in three ways. Okay. The one is what we call a product strategy, and particularly the second primary one is what we call a place strategy. So, a product strategy means that you could have come to a McDonald's and ordered the same cappuccino across the counter, but you would not see a barista and and sort of a McCafe kind of setup. But the quality of the coffee would be the same, and it would all be done behind the scenes. Yeah, that's a slightly nothing is easy, but slightly easier strategy. But we chose to go with place because place is little more difficult to implement. But we felt we wanted consumers to see the gourmet side of the coffee.
Mhm.
Baristas making
Correct.
it is handmade, is crafted for you, and all of that. And it worked. But the most important thing I'll tell you, Sahil, is that coffee is an art, right? So it's not about. So people would ask me that it's doing well. Why aren't you opening more McCafes faster and so on? So what we were doing was we were training 200, 300 baristas at a time, and we were crystal clear that you launch McCafe with re-imaged restaurants. So we were simultaneously re-imaging as well, and we had a pretty well laid out master plan of how we want to roll out. Because in a retail, I think rolling out is most important. So net it worked out. Consumers loved it, and McCafe thankfully is doing quite well. But there was a lot of
And
science behind it as well.
correct. No, it's been great. I mean, we love the coffee there now, and we prefer it over Starbucks. But at the same time, one other important thing which I noticed at a couple of your outlets is the implementation of technology, right? And
Absolutely.
that's been pretty crazy. So, what got you to think around that? Because we perceive McDonald's as a quick meal in and out, but the amount of tech you've enabled into the restaurants now has been phenomenal.
And
No,
just
thank
as
you,
a
Sahil. So,
before you
sorry,
answer
Sam.
that, Amit, I just want to add that you guys did it at a time in the pre-Geo era
Yeah.
when internet was not. And I remember going to some McDonald outlet where my phone network wasn't great, but they had a touch screen and everything was working very seamlessly. So yeah, just I think big question around how you dealt with that.
So, I mean, it's a slightly longer answer because I want to give you some context. What happened is that while we were doing really well between 2004 and 2012, we doubled our same store sales. We had the best record profit ever. And, we thought we were invincible. Life was great. And we got caught in this whole thing of being invincible. And that led me to one of my learnings that you make your biggest mistakes in your highs, okay, when you think you are invincible. And that kind of, we'll talk a little bit about it later when it comes to investing and capital allocation and things like that. But in 2013, we realized one thing, that even though I'm sort of a student of Jack Welch and he was my guru, and Jack Welch's whole thinking is around never letting bureaucracy come into the organization, we realized that we had become very slow in our implementation. And to be honest, we had really fallen back on technology. Our customers had moved ahead in their life, and our brand had stayed back. and we became known only for affordable burgers. Yeah, obviously, simultaneously, the economy tanked in 2013, inflation was rampant, and the entire sector and the entire industry started falling down. So that is when, I said that now we need HRPL and Westlife 2.0. Yeah, the McDonald's brand has to completely reorient itself. But simultaneously, I learned another thing. And what I learned is, and I tell media this every single day, when people ask me what is this one big thing that you're going to do tomorrow or day after, I tell him that the day I have to do one big thing, you should sell our stock. And the reason is that we need to evolve every single day because the consumer is changing every single day.
Mm-hmm.
That means every 2 to 3 years, if you recognize the McDonald's you went 3 years ago, we've not done our job. Okay, and 3 years ago we were X, today we are Y, day after we will be Z. Yeah. Now, why does this link into technology? So what had happened is that, remember I said the consumers young at that, internet, smartphones, that whole revolution was coming, and we had fallen back on digital. Yeah, so in 2012 and 13 we were really behind. We did not even have a digital organization. The important thing is when we did a bit of a culture study, yeah, and I call it transient advantage. We can talk about that a bit later. But the behaviors required for an organization that is evolving every day, yeah, did not reflect the behavior at HRPL and Westlife. So that
Mm-hmm.
is when we started making significant changes, and we said to ourselves that we will now never allow our brand to fall behind consumer needs. And one of the biggest things that we identified as a gap was digital. I mean, if you go back at that period, we were not even accepting credit cards. Can you believe that? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Now, payment game has changed completely. You have to be able to accept payment in any way and every way that the consumer is talking about.
Correct.
So that was when we made the transformation. We upgraded our POS systems. We launched Experience of the Future restaurants. We built the backbone of technology, and therefore, we launched an app for our delivery business in 2014-15. And therefore, when this crisis came, our foundation was so strongly in place, yeah, that we could continue to pivot the business very, very quickly into convenience, into where
Mm-hmm.
the consumer was consuming. So we were the first company in India in QSR to launch contactless delivery, contactless in-store ordering, contactless takeaway, on the go. On the go is a very interesting concept which cannot be done without technology, and it adds quite a bit of incremental sales. People don't get that normally. But on the go means that as you are approaching the restaurant, you place the order and we come outside and deliver it to you. Yeah, so it's like a bit like drive through. So
Wow.
that was our journey on technology. A bit of a long answer, but I wanted to ensure you get the context that we were behind,
Absolutely.
but now we've kind of caught up quite well.
No, and you caught up in how, Amit. Amit, you referred to the point about capital allocation and investing, and let's first dig into how you did it for the company, and then we'll move to how your own personal journey has been. But what have been your big learnings around how companies should manage their cash?
I mean, we learned the hard way, to be honest, Sandeep. So what happened is, I keep going back to 2012 and 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So we had fixed our unit economics. We were doing really well. What happened is slowly cost started creeping back. Between 2004 and 2012, like I told you, we thought we are invincible. And what we did is we allowed cost to come back into store development cost. So that means to build a restaurant, the cost started going up, and it was great till sales were going up. But when sales plateaued, yeah, we struggled. So in 2012 and 13, we realized that we need to completely reorient the way we look at the way we are putting capital to work. So the first
Mm-hmm.
thing we did is, however, instead of stopping growth, because that was not the right answer, we launched Restaurant Operating Platform 2.0. And in
Mm-hmm.
Restaurant Operating Platform 2.0, we got the cost back down to what was sensible, right? And we continued to grow. But at that time, we made it a significant discipline in the company where we started focusing very, very hard on side by side performance. We started looking at what we budget to open a restaurant versus what we actually do. So there was very, very serious review mechanisms, discipline. Every new capital, we were watching the return on incrementally invested capital, right? So now I'll tell you another story linked to McCafe that will tell may answer your question as well. So we are sitting. This is 2013. Yeah, business is tanking by the day, and we were talking about all the things I just talked about, and the question came: should we do McCafe or we shouldn't do? Now, McCafe means you have to not only reimage the restaurant, you are launching a new platform while the capital allocation and the cost structure, return on capital employed is all struggling.
Correct.
So my leadership team is saying, no, this is not the right time to do McCafe and da 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 da. So I told them that, see, let's first analyze the risk. Yeah. At the end of the day, we are debt free. In fact, we had that time even 200 crores plus cash in the bank. I
Correct.
said that, the risk on McCafe is what? It's 5 crores. But if we are not going to take this risk, how are we going to reinvent the business? Right? I said that
Mhm.
McCafe, all the consumer data, everything is telling us is the right thing to do. So I told my team there that is my business call, okay, because capital allocation was my single call. I said I listen to everybody, but I make the call on capital. So I said, chalo, 5 crore, let's put it in, right? And we built the first McCafe in Crossroads. Yeah, that
Mhm.
McCafe cost me 75 lakhs. Okay. At 75 lakhs, nothing is viable. So we look very, very carefully at what is the average unit volume that we are going to get, what is the capital deployed to build that, and therefore what is the cash flow, what is the ROC we have. I mean, without every single site going through that discipline, we do not put any capital. Now, the minute we launched coffee, it started doing well. Okay, but obviously, one McCafe does not mean that the consumers know McDonald's as McCafe. So
That's
we
right.
decided that we are going to focus on Mumbai. But what is the next thing we did? For 6 months, we did not open a single McCafe. What we
Mhm.
did instead was we made that 75 lakhs, which was global standards, all imported material, and we brought that down to 20 lakhs. At 20 lakhs, I'll say this here today, that basically at even a 5,000 incremental rupee sale per day of coffee, yeah, it may made sure that we recovered our capital on McCafe. So it became a no-brainer that we
Wow.
don't have to think about anything. We can open a McCafe irrespective. So while we got that right, we got the baristas right, and that is when we in the next year we made the 5 crore, we made it 10, then we made it. Then I said, once we felt that we have enough what I call empirical evidence, again coming from good to great, and we have enough history of sites, we started then building 50 McCafes a year. So now what we've done is we have very, very, very serious discipline on capital allocation. Our capital goes primarily in building new restaurants, re-imaging, adding McCafe, and things like that. And we do a review on that. And there is accountability around return on capital employed. So our return on capital employed is actually quite low because of historic reasons, but it was rapidly moving up, and our target is to get to 20-25%. And so the answer to our learning is at least that you got to be very disciplined, and it cannot go on gut, and you have to build empirical evidence, and you go one step at a time. So for example, don't say I'll put 100 crores depending on the company's capacity. For us, 5 crores was a risk we could take. We could carry that risk, so we took the risk of that 5 crores. So at that time I could not take a 100 crore risk. So you got to manage your risk in that sense. So I hope this gives a bit of flavor.
Yeah, but I guess
Yes.
so. I think that's a learning in capital allocation, but also in how you were able to bring down costs, right? A 70% cost reduction in what is a global standard product is unheard of. And I feel like most of McDonald's globally will probably benefit from those learnings on how you did it, right?
We had no option. When you have to fight for survival, then you find solutions that are not visible.
Absolutely.
No, that's amazing. And now, Amit, let's just dig in a little deeper into your personal investing journey. I
Mm.
think as an entrepreneur, you're juggling multiple things. There are opportunities on the investing side. There is stuff happening on the business side. Sometimes both are not in the same direction. So how have you dealt with your own investment?
Sure. Um, No, I'll give you my honest view and my honest learning here. What had happened is,
Mhm.
my many years ago, my belief, I grew up with the belief that it's all about the operating business, and our family is all about entrepreneurs. So we would invest in our own businesses and we would grow that. And we never really, but thankfully, we always did have a small treasury, but we never really bothered too much about it. But I must say that 5 to 10 years ago, I realized that that also needs to be built. But more recently, in the last 3 to 4 years, so my learning on investing has come. Firstly, you got to be very clear about your risk appetite and what are you gunning for. If it's a side thing, I think it has a certain thing. If it's your primary driver, it's a certain thing. If you're retired, it's a certain way of doing things, and so on and so forth. However, from my point of view, what my first biggest learning is that along with your operating business, you got to start building your own individual capital outside of the business as well. And that needs to be actively managed. Yeah, it cannot be given a secondary view like we used to. The second big thing I learned is that basically you gotta balance your portfolio out, and you gotta play between equities. You gotta look at some private equity. You gotta look at some fixed income return, and you got to
Mhm.
balance that out. But it all again depends on your own individual needs. If suppose there's no need, then you got to look at time horizon. Like if you go private equity, while the gains are very large, but you're locked in for a long period of time. If you do fixed income, that's good. If you need the income, equities, you got to have some exposure in equity because that's where you get the growth aspect. Then you got to have diversity geographically. I'm thankfully now in India you are allowed to invest offshore as well, so you get a bit of play in in the offshore markets. So I'm a firm believer in dividing all this up. Yeah. And again, I'm a goal oriented guy. So for example, in India, I always believe that you got to at least get a 15% return minimum. I know interest rates have gone down, and therefore based on my risk appetite, based on how I think about investing, and therefore then I try to plan my investable surplus in that manner. And last thing I want to say there is that people tend to forget time horizon, and I think time horizon is an extremely important thing. If all your investments are locked in for 10 years, and suppose some other opportunity comes, forget even need, yeah, then you don't have enough cash available to deploy. So it's not an easy thing, but it all depends on the individual's relevance, where they stand in their life, what are their needs, and it's got to be balanced based on that. So that's how at least I think about it. 15% return, split it between private equity, so that you can get a bit of long-term growth, get some fixed income, do some bits of equity, and then you do diversification geographically.
Oh, absolutely, Amit. And I think the good point you mentioned is 15%. But the most important thing is there that you need to compound that 15% year on year, right? A lot of people, what I've seen, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is they see 30-40% return possibly in a shorter period, and then they walk away from the markets or they
Mhm.
walk away from their investments, right? But I think compounding at that 15% over a 10-15 year period is what actually gets you
Absolutely.
the net worth that you are gunning for, right? And that goal at the end of the day.
No, that's a very, very, very good and important point, sir. My learning is you got to stay the course. So what happens is that I feel that's why you got to keep liquid cash also. Like let's say the pandemic happened.
Correct.
Yeah, I feel when the markets collapsed, I was a buyer. I was buying everything. And to be honest, that's worked out very well for me. But I did not take debt on. I bought with my own funds, right? And that allowed me to sort of deal with it. So today, what's happening 2 years later, markets have gone up like crazy. But even when they crash, yeah, I'm there. And it doesn't bother me at all.
Correct.
So that is the point you're making. You got to stay
No,
invested.
absolutely.
Especially if you're taking equities, you got to take a 5 year view. You can't just keep coming in, exiting, coming in and exiting. You got to stay the course. And that is when you start compounding the returns. Otherwise, you don't compound
No,
returns.
absolutely, Amit. Just a quick take from you on, you've seen a bunch of entrepreneurs in India, budding all over the place, right? We've had some crazy amount of unicorns in the
Mhm.
last couple of months and years as well in India. What's your take on how this is going to progress over the next couple of years? Are you doing yourself some amount of startup investing as well? And the fire you see in these entrepreneurs today is very, very different than what it was before, right? So, how do you see this panning over the next couple of years, especially from an India point of view?
No, I think these are very, very exciting times. While some people say it's a bubble, I think some good things are here to stay. I think the ecosystem that is emerging because of these unicorns is going to make us not definitely not Silicon Valley, because for that rules and regulations of the
Have
government
to
also
change,
have to
yes,
open up a bit.
yes,
But it's gonna get there, and I think it's going to encourage more and more people to become entrepreneurs. And my thought process around that is the way I'm thinking about investing in startups is one, you must have a play in it. There's no doubt in my mind. But how I thought about it is, again, take 5 crores, okay, and you at least in
Mm-hmm.
adjacency. So how I'm thinking about it is, okay, we are in the retail business. Let's say there's a company that is doing something decent in payments, or somebody is doing some agri tech, or somebody is doing something around the consumer experience, right? I'm saying, can we start investing in such companies where later on, if anything really works out, then we could even acquire that company and integrate that technology into our core
right.
business. Yeah. Sometimes I think about that. Should we do incubation? Should we use some of our capital and help an incubation lab where they bring ideas to us which we can buy? I'm still thinking with a corporate mindset. Yeah, because the whole idea is, how do I take our current business and whatever its value is today, how do I triple that value? Okay, and not get lost or lose out on this phenomenal work in the startup ecosystem where they are redefining the way things are being done from a consumer point of view. So what happens is, when you are a very large company, yeah, you tend to slow down, and that is why they call ambidextrous organizations are the best way to go, where you take a smaller company, a startup in these areas that are connected to your business, and start investing in them with the view that you can help them keep investing, and maybe even do a strategic
Buyout at
buyout
some
at
point,
some
yeah.
point in time. And at a personal level, I'm more opportunistic. Okay, primarily I go with the entrepreneur and the theme. And I must say, though, that I'm not an expert, so I have friends who are really good, and then I co-invest with them. So that is how I've been thinking about it. Or put in, I have even invested in one or two funds that are doing startup investing. So these are different ways in which I've sort of dealt with the situation.
I mean, it'll be good to know for our listeners what are the things that you've learned from your investing mistakes. Like throughout our journey, we've all made some errors of judgment, sometimes errors of omission that you just missed the opportunity. How, what has been the one or two couple of things that have stood out for you?
The most important one, I'll tell you, is not new, but it is called FOMO. Yeah, fear of. And when you go after fear of missing out and you hear a cocktail table, everybody's making money and you are not, right? That's what you
Correct.
feel. But that's not the truth, because people only talk about their wins. They don't necessarily talk about the losses, not because they want to lead people in the wrong direction, but what are you proud of? Your wins, right? Not necessarily your losses. So what happens is, you start feeling, my God, the whole world is doing this, and then you make an unqualified sort of investment. So I think fear of losing out is one aspect where I feel at least I've made the biggest mistake, because then you tend to get impulsive and you feel that you need a part of the action as well. So
Absolutely.
I would say single, that would be the
Yeah,
key.
I completely agree with that. So there are two four-letter acronyms, right? FOMO and YOLO, right? Fear of missing out and you only live once. And when these two things impact your investing, I think there is something to be worked on.
Agreed.
No, no, I think this is excellent, Amit, and a huge learning for our listeners as well. I guess there's one question that we ask all our guests on the show. It is that one big takeaway, their insider tip on investing. And I know we think of tips like a stock tip or something like that, but I'm trying to think a little beyond. And what is that one thing that you would like folks to think about when it comes to their portfolios?
Um, it's a tough one, but I always think of, no pain, no gain, no risk, no return. And as long as you get that, So that when somebody offers you that I'll get you 30%, yeah, it may be correct. But the minute you hear 30%, you have to recognize that the risk goes up dramatically. And as long as you recognize that, and on that you add time horizon. People forget
Mhm.
time horizon. Okay, so when you bring the two together, I think to me that's how I think of everything. No risk, no return, no pain, no gain, and you bring time horizon into the equation, and I think you have a decent foundation to start thinking about investing.
Yeah, I guess you need to be at peace with the loss that
Correct.
can happen if you make that bet.
Absolutely. See, investing is not for the faint-hearted. I always say, because then you gotta go fixed income. Okay, if you don't have the courage to, if markets go up and down and you go up and down with it, I don't think you're an investor. Okay, then you are a sort of punter. But I personally feel, I even feel that you want to punt with 5% of your
Right.
portfolio. Okay, though if you punt with 100, you're going to have sleepless nights. So I think of very, very big investors in India who are so. I mean, Warren Buffett, of course, for me is God, and one of his lines is sort of my favorite. Okay, and that goes with investing as well. He says, "Only when the tide is out, you know who is swimming naked." Yeah, I never forget that. Okay, because when the tide is in, everybody's doing
Correct.
well. It's
Correct.
kind of what I'm talking about earlier, right? But when the tide is out, you'll realize kitna debt hai, what else is going on in their life,
Everything is
and
exposed.
really all not hunky dory. Exactly. So that's the other one one's got to keep in mind.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
And
That's
invest in businesses that have foundations, right? Like you said,
exactly,
like
exactly,
uh,
exactly.
so
So even though it may look bad with the pandemic today, you know that the management is solid, business has oxygen canisters, its competitive advantage place is good, well placed in the industry. You can sleep peacefully. You don't have to worry. That's how
yeah.
I think about it.
Absolutely. No, Amit, that's been amazing. I think we've learned a lot as always from you, and especially for our deserved clients and going forward for everyone who listens to this podcast. I think it will be a massive, massive value addition in terms of education, etc. So super happy to have you with us on the show, Amit. And anything you want to leave us with at the end, or we'll wrap it up then.
No, I just want to say you all have done an amazing job. Entrepreneurship is a great excitement and fun journey, but just stay the course. Don't worry about the challenges that come. Staying the course, being smart about things, which I'm sure you are, you will get there. And my real best wishes to all of you to make it
Thank
happen.
you, Amit.
And thank you for having me on the show as
Thank
well.
you, Amit. It's been a pleasure, and but more than that, it's also been a privilege to have you as our first guest on the show. I feel that we couldn't have hoped for a better start, and I look forward to meeting you in person very soon.